Aang was left with a stunned expression on his face due to Lena's sudden appearance. He could only stare at her cakes, her back, as she appeared in front of our boy, saving him from Dylan's attack. But Aang was wondering if she had used a green core to forcefully regenerate her body into its peak form. Dylan, on the other hand, didn't feel worried about her sudden appearance. He even reminds Lena of how she wasn't even allowed to wear her battle uniforms ever again. Seeing her sudden appearance here, Dylan could only take it as a challenge to their king's decision. But our brave girl Lena was no longer the weak little girl from before. She firmly stands against Dylan, correcting him that she was only barred from participating in any programs that are related to hunting demons, and for the issue regarding the battle uniform. She was allowed to wear them, as they were her only clothes. If she was actually banned, wouldn't that mean she had to walk around naked? Seeing the way she talked back to Dylan, Aang could see how Lena was still Lena, being the straightforward and honest person he knew from before in the past. Aang knew her to be the most liveliest and the most straightforward out of the 6 talents. In his previous life, Aang was always the one standing in front of her. He never thought that this time, it would be her turn to do the same for him. Even the announcer was caught off guard by the fact that a member of the former 6 talents Lena Vil had made her sudden appearance on the battlefield. The announcer wonders if this was a part of some secret segment, and he couldn't believe the amount of surprises for this year's demon hunting competition. Dylan continues to tell Lena about how he respected her as a named warrior from the past, but he assures her that he wasn't going to give her any chance to save face. After all, Dylan sees Lena as a loose-lipped bitch. But Lena wasn't afraid of Dylan at all. Her face was filled with confidence as she knew that Dylan, being a part of the new 6 talents, couldn't get into conflicts right now since they were in front of a massive audience. She even tells him that Aang was a child of an acquaintance that she knew, and that he had tested him enough. But she knew deep down that there was something else behind the reason why Dylan wanted to test Aang. Hearing her sharp remarks, Dylan couldn't help but feel angry as a vein popped up on the side of his face. He starts to laugh to himself, telling Lena and Aang that they were a bunch of people that made him sick, before unleashing a new wave of green skill attack. The announcer was quick to analyze Dylan's sudden attack as the drill snake's command. This was an AoE skill that shoots multiple arrows out in a fan-shaped formation, a skill that the enemy can never dodge. Angered by the sudden attack from the shameless bastard, Lena herself charges her abilities up to counterattack. But before she could do anything, a shadow dashes past her. It was Aang, who managed to block the green arrow attacks with his broadsword. His sudden action causes Lena to be stunned as she sees the past Aang within the present Aang, after he had defended her from Dylan's attack. Even though he had managed to block the green arrows, more of them appeared from the sides, heading straight to Lena. This time, Lena grabs onto Aang's shoulder, telling him to get behind her, as it was her time to shine. Using her barrier as a weapon, Lena punches the crap out of the incoming arrow attacks. Even though he was protected, Aang felt a sudden rush of panic, as the reason why he came forward to block the attack was because he didn't want Lena to attack. Because he knew her so well, that with her personality, when Lena gets stubborn and fights, there will definitely be casualties. It turns out to be true as Lena charges straight towards Dylan without hesitation and with only murder in her eyes. The announcer in the broadcasting room was shocked to see this moment. He tells the crowd that there was a chance of seeing a fight between the new and former 6 talents, an event that was even rarer than that of a septuple-finned demon appearing. Dylan was excited by Lena's actions, telling her that he had to use all of his strength in order to fight against her. And so, the 2 members of the 6 talents rushed forward, facing off against one another, Dylan with his green spear, Lena with her fist of fury. But as they were moving closer to one another, Aang started to take a deep breath in as the announcer revealed to everyone that Dylan was using his ultimate technique, the demon-piercing gun, which shows that he was actually serious about this. "Thank you, great warrior Dylan," shouted Aang so loudly that it stopped both warriors in their tracks. Lena was baffled by Aang's sudden shout, turning around to face him with a blurred expression on her face. But our boy continues his shouting, thanking Dylan for teaching him so many battle skills and techniques. Aang started to smile, realizing that his plan was working. With a mighty shout once again, Aang thanks Dylan who, despite being so busy, had chosen to teach the younger generation like him some of his battle experience. From Paris in the waiting into the audience in the arena, everyone was completely confused and stunned by Aang's sudden shouting. He continues to shout, asking Dylan if he was satisfied with his performance now before ending with a smile on his face. The announcer catches what Aang was saying, telling the crowd about how the vanguard warrior from Pictia was expressing his gratitude towards Lord Dylan excitedly. Hearing this, the crowd had a mixed reaction towards what was happening. Some of them wanted the 2 septuple warriors to fight as it would be the highlight of the event, but some were worried, knowing that if two such powerful warriors were to fight, then a war might break out, so just seeing some of Lord Dylan's moves would be enough. Convincing the others, the crowd decided to just cheer on Dylan for his great performance, leaving him stunned as he continues to hear the cheers from the crowd, about how he was spending his precious time to teach the younger generations. Closing his eyes, he realizes how clever Aang's plan was. With the way things are, Dylan wouldn't be able to attack anymore. Aang tells Dylan that as the next generation of warriors, he was sure to live up to his expectations, making sure to work hard on his skills. But in his mind, he was glad that his method of killing with flattery worked well with Dylan, since with so many people watching them right now, Dylan wouldn't be able to make another move. Lena on the other hand was upset, telling Aang that since her mood was ruined, she wasn't going to fight anymore. Dylan decided to stop the fight here as well, summoning his trusty microphone. He announces to the crowd that Aang had passed his so-called test, praising Aang as being a truly astounding young warrior. The announcer reveals to the crowd that Aang, the vanguard member of Pictia, had gained Dylan's recognition and congratulates Pictia's city for winning this year's competition. Hearing the announcement of this year's winner for the demon hunting competition, the crowd started to cheer loudly for Pictia. Back in their waiting room, the entire team was watching what was going on. They couldn't believe that they had won the competition without having to do anything at all. The announcer even declares that this is the fastest and the most surprising demon hunting competition that has ever taken place, a miracle created by the hands of the vanguard member named Aang. As Lena left the battlefield, she whispered something that only Aang could hear as she walked past him. The news of the city started to spread the news about Aang, calling his arrival as a surprising aid. The newscaster announced that Pictia City had managed to take down the trophy for this year's demon hunting competition with just their vanguard member alone. But one no was paying attention as they were busying throwing Aang high up into the air. With the massive golden trophy present in their room surrounded by flowers, Paris couldn't help herself, praising Aang for being brave and helping her city to win this year's competition. Looking at how excited she was, Aang couldn't reveal the fact that he was almost killed. Paris was definitely high this time as she grabbed our boy and pushed him into the heavenly mountains, telling Aang that he was free to do whatever he wanted to her, as tonight, it would be her treat. Lucky man, the Manhwa might end her as Aang suffocates in the heavenly mountains, while Paris team members begs her to let go of Aang and to calm down. After coming back to life, Aang calls out to Paris in a serious tone, asking her if she still remembers what she had promised him from before. She confidently tells him that she did, ensuring that with a pledge, Aang would be able to talk with the person in charge of managing the energy crystals. Aang was glad to hear that, but as he dusts off his cape, he realizes how dirty his clothes were, so he asks Paris if it was possible for him to get a set of regular clothes, and for the celebrations, he wouldn't be participating in it. Hearing that, a member of the team was curious if Aang was going on a date, with a guy or girl. Hearing that question, Aang couldn't help but smile, before revealing that he was meeting with an old acquaintance of his. The scene shifts to show Lena standing by herself on a cliff, overlooking the city. Aang arrives, dressed like a Korean drama male lead. As the sun begins to set, he announces his arrival to Lena, asking her what she needed since she told him to come here. As she turned around, Lena's face was filled with disbelief upon seeing that Aang had actually arrived. She recalled their past memory of how Aang revealed his anime to her, and that she had whispered to him to meet her at their secret base after she left the battlefield. Which made her question Aang about how he knew about this secret base. As she takes a few steps towards Aang, her voice starts to shake, with tears filling her eyes. She looks at our boy, asking him if he really was the Aang that she knew. We turn to a distant past memory, where Lena proudly shows off to Aang about this secret spot, and how they could see the entire city from here and that no one else has ever been here before. As she basked in the rays of sunlight, she was happy. Since it was just her and Aang present here, this was when she decided that this spot on this exact cliff was to be her secret base. Aang's reaction to her words was a flick to the forehead. Hearing her say that this was her secret, made him wonder if she was still a kid. But Lena was hella pissed at Aang for flicking her forehead again as it would make her stupid. She even shouts at Aang, telling him that everyone wants their own secret base and that he knows nothing, only about how to kill demons and nothing else. But looking at where they were, with the glorious sunrise, Aang admits that this place was serene. Turning around, Lena tells Aang to look as she summons her powers, deciding that this place was their secret base. She craves their names onto a nearby boulder. Lena and Aang, we now return to the present, where that same boulder is now covered in dirt and moss, hiding parts of their names on it. Lena was still tearing up as she asked Aang if he remembers this spot, their secret base. Aang hesitated to answer her as he looked at her face. Lena turns around, apologizing for her sudden actions in the moment, and for scaring Aang. She explains to Aang that he felt very similar to someone close to her, a very dear friend. She continues to tell Aang that he had acted too recklessly in the competition, and that if she hadn't arrived in time, he might have lost his life, so with that, she wanted him to consider it as payment for his help from back at the statue. Making them equal now, but then Aang calls out to Lena, using the real version this time, surprising her as she turns around slowly, asking him about what he had just called her. With the same forehead flick, Aang repeats the very same words he said to her in the past at this exact spot. You're still going on about your secret base stuff? It's been so many years, and yet you're still a kid. Hearing this and seeing his past self, Lena finally cried and let out her tears. Aang was glad to see that she was still okay even after all these years. With a deep breath out, he reveals to Lena that he was back, the one she knew as a dear friend and the king of warriors, Aang. Wasting no time at all, she rushes in for a hug. As she held her face close to his chest, she started to cry even more, choking on her words. She asked Aang about why he was only returning back now, and about where he had been this entire time. Aang didn't reply at all, and only held Lena in his arms as she continued to cry and wail everything she has within her soul, letting out her frustrations that she held within after all these years. Lena finally learns that Aang had reincarnated from half a century ago, and that there was a octuple-finned demon in the steel of the ancient king, proving that the rank of septuple-finned demon wasn't the highest that they can reach. Aang tells her that it was hard for him to understand as well, since he couldn't figure out how it happened either. It seems absurd to him even though he was the one saying it, but if he could place it in simpler terms, then he meant that he had actually died half a century ago. And yet, here he was, reincarnated in the present day, with something weird inside of his body. But Lena didn't seem concerned about all that, she was just glad that Aang was still alive. Seeing her reaction, Aang decided to ask about something he didn't understand. Why was everyone in the city so hostile towards them, the old king and the former 6 talents now? He recalled that back in their time, they have fought with their lives for the sake of all humanity, so why would the people hate them now? Lena reveals that if there was a reason, it would be because of him. She explains that in the Battle of Dawn back then, Aang had led a squad of warriors to the steel of the ancient king, even though most of them strongly advised him not to enter the steel of the ancient king rashly. A representative of the logistics department in the warriors came to the front line to stop Aang. Since they were in a rare advantage, everyone wished to maintain the current balance. But the past Aang didn't listen to their explanations, and simply told everyone to wait for their return. With that, he led a group of warriors inside. After some time, the people received word that he had died in the steel of the ancient king. As news of his death was spread around, the warriors' momentum and confidence fell to rock bottom. The warrior everyone knew as the strongest had died, their king had left them behind, and because of that, despair spread throughout all of humankind. After Aang's death, the demonic wave launched a large-scale counterattack. The territory that humanity had reclaimed was now occupied and trampled on by the demons once again. The ground was covered with the corpses of their human warriors. At that time, someone calculated that 90% of humanity's warriors perished. Many people believe that all of this should not have happened. If Aang had listened to them back then, if only he didn't enter the steel of the ancient king so rashly, then maybe the number of survivors of the battle for Dawn would have been many times greater. After that, with the flow of time, the new 6 talents and new kings slowly appeared. These new people were also a part of the group that had opposed Aang's decision back then, which was why so many people hated Aang right now. The rest of Aang's 6 talents were cast aside by the people, as they were seen as his supporters. In the end, the new king had revoked their status as warriors. For the first time, Aang started to tremble as he realized what his past decision had done to the world and the amount of deaths he had caused. Lena assures him that she was fine after so many years, and because it was now in the past, who was right wasn't that important. She continues to tell Aang that when she passes by his statue, she would stop and gaze at it, recalling so many things. Seeing how he was alive in a strange manner now, Lena called it a miracle. But Aang was furious by the outcome of his decision. He explains that the reason he went into the steel of the ancient king was to end all of the demons, so that their future descendants would no longer have to deal with them. Everything he did it for humanity. With her hand on his face, Lena tells him that she understands, but reminded Aang that he couldn't blame the people, because as their king, it was natural for him to become the target of blame. Accepting her explanation, Aang turns to ask about what had happened to his 6 talents. Lena reveals that 3 of them had died after his death in a battle, only 3 including her remained. The yellow core 6 talent known as Anran of the Earth was heavily injured, and later resigned on their accord, going into seclusion in a city somewhere. As she gazes back to the city, Lena tells Aang that she had planned on leaving this place but it was filled with memories. She then reveals that the last member, Blue Core Phantom Desha, had revolted against the new king, and had been thrown into the dungeon to await his death after getting his arms and legs broken. Aang was furious to learn how they treated his fellow comrade. His anger boiled over, resulting in his demonic aura being unleashed. He shouts at Lena, wondering why she hasn't joined forces with their supporters to overthrow the new king. She hears him and reveals that the current king was the only triple-core septuple finned warrior. She believed that even the Aang from the past known as the strongest human warrior wouldn't be able to beat the new king. She knew that Aang had noticed that the current 6 talents had all surpassed the past versions as they were double-core septuple finned warriors. But Aang still wanted to break Desha from out of the dungeon as he couldn't watch him die. His mind was filled with thoughts about how they had achieved a triple core. But as he was thinking, Lena tells him that there was a way. With a serious look in her eye, she asks Aang if he was aware of the elemental powers that the demons currently hold.
Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.